they talk to me. You got your rules and your religion, all designed to keep you safe. But when rules start getting broken, you start questioning your faith. I have a voice that is my savior, hates to love and loves to hate. I have a voice that has the knowledge and the power to your fate.
Hello and welcome to a special anniversary or celebration edition of the WWE Wrestling Talk Show with Rich Rock Jones and
Sean Redismith as we celebrate 20 years of my debut, or specifically my alter ego, Randy Orton in WWE all the way back 20 years ago in 2002 on, Monday.
yes, Randall Keith Orton assigned for the World Wrestling Federation back in 2001. It wasn't until April 25th, 2002, 20 years ago exactly this past Monday, that he made his televised debut on SmackDown facing Hardcore Holly.
Yes, and I would end up picking up the win on that exchange.
In this show, we will go through highlights of the past 20 years, maybe skipping over 1 or 2 years where he wasn't as featured. But for the most part, barring various injuries and a couple of suspensions due to a bad attitude, Randy Orton has been one constant over the past 20 years, more so than John Cena.
I'd say that's a compliment.
So, as we mentioned, Orton made his debut on the April 25th, 2002 episode of SmackDown. However, in September of 2002, he was traded to Raw, in which he would defeat Steven Richards in his debut match. However, tragedy would strike within weeks.
Yes.
As weeks into his Raw debut, he would pick up the first of what would be a fair few shoulder injuries.
Yes. Well, you actually, I had.
Upon his return was when Orton would really start to become the character we know him to be today, when he would join just a little known stable called Evolution.
Which at the time was fronted by Triple H, Ric Flair, and Batista.
And would dominate Raw for much of 2003 and 2004 and even part of 2005. But we're focusing on Randy Orton. Because he would be a vital part of Triple H keeping the World Heavyweight Championship for 2003. And then at the end of the year, following Stone Cold's ousting as co-GM, Randy Orton would win his first championship at Armageddon.
Yes, the Intercontinental Championship.
In a match with Rob Van Dam, also having Mr. Socko as the special guest referee.
And then, also during this time, I would also enter a feud with Mick Foley.
Yes, following that Intercontinental title win, Foley and Orton would go at it. Foley would eliminate Orton from the 2004 Royal Rumble match. Mr. Black Adam.
Shout out DC.
Dwayne Johnson would come back up to team with Mick Foley in a 2-on-3 handicap match at WrestleMania 20.
In which I won.
And then in a brutal hardcore match at Backlash, there was an Intercontinental Championship match between Randy Orton and yes. However, after this time period, he would slowly go on to lose the Intercontinental Championship to future tag team partner / rival Edge. We'll get into that in a while.
We will.
Then, after losing the Intercontinental Championship, he would turn to the World Heavyweight Championship at SummerSlam, going into a match against Chris.
Yeah, hang on. Just in case you missed it, Chris. There you go.
and to become the youngest world champion in WWE history. Probably only done because of the issues at the time surrounding Brock Lesnar.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
However, after picking up the World Heavyweight Championship, he would be ousted from Evolution
In brutal.
and would ultimately lose the championship to Triple H due to combined interference from Ric Flair, Batista, and Jonathan Coachman.
Yes, you heard us right. Jonathan freaking Coachman.
Orton would continue to feud with Evolution members going into a steel cage match with Ric Flair at W Tuesday. Then, after having him be general manager for a week,
Which was interesting.
following the stipulation at Survivor Series in which Team Orton beat Team H. He would continue his feud and put himself and opponents into a elimination chamber match. Now, in 2005, things got a little bit, how do we say this, interesting when Orton decided to knock upon the devil's door.
Yeah, so how do we describe this? How can we?
He decided it would be a very good idea to challenge The Undertaker.
Yes, and begin what me and my colleague would now call the Legend Killer run.
And in a 3 or 4 match series, I would go from WrestleMania 21,
Yes,
SummerSlam.
in a casket, not a casket, but one-on-one.
Then he would attempt to burn Undertaker in a casket at No Mercy.
And I set the casket on fire, and then when the Undertaker came back in Survivor Series,
It ultimately led to Hell in a Cell.
at Armageddon in 2005.
2006, things got a little bit interesting and almost disgusting.
Yes. Rey Mysterio eliminated Randy Orton from the Royal Rumble in 2006, which was to win. He decided to do the one thing which was very disgusting during the promo with Rey Mysterio. And we apologise for saying this in advance. Eddie isn't in heaven, Eddie is down there in hell, he once said.
Yes, because here at WWE were quite heavily playing into the fact of Eddie Guerrero's death being Rey Mysterio's motivation. This would then lead to a match of No Way Out between Rey Mysterio and Randy Orton, in which if Orton won, he would take Mysterio's place in the title match of WrestleMania.
Which Orton did win.
However, thanks to some common decency and common sense of General Manager Theodore Orton,
Yes.
Rey Mysterio was added back to the match. And would ultimately win the World Heavyweight Championship by pinning Randy Orton.
Oh yes, I ended up being the fall guy, didn't I?
And then on the SmackDown after WrestleMania, would challenge Rey Mysterio, but lose to that. But then shortly after WrestleMania, Randy Orton was suspended for 60 days for quote-unquote unprofessional conduct.
So then we move forward
To cover this up, they did a storyline where Orton's ankle was broken by Kurt Angle in a Kevin qualifier.
I returned back to Raw, found RKO Kurt Angle, which led to a match at ECW One Stand in 2006, in which I lost.
And then a rematch at Vengeance of the same year in which he won. And then that would be, I believe, one of Kurt Angle, if not Kurt Angle's last match.
We'll move into a company we will not mention.
Here, the kind of legend killer would reappear when at SummerSlam, Orton would target Hulk Hogan.
Yes, and then at SummerSlam I would challenge Hulk Hogan to a match, but once again, I would lose.
And then in late 2006, following a newly reformed D-Generation X's reunion and cost an Edge the WWE Championship.
Decided to form a tag team proudly known as Rated RKO.
They would defeat DX at Cyber Sunday, even a little bit of help from referee Alec Bischoff.
Yes.
Then they would win the World Tag Team Championships from Ric Flair and Larry Piper.
Would.
This storyline came to a slight end if Triple H would suffer a legitimate injury again on the same
Doing one of
quad.
his famous knees.
The same quad.
Yep, same.
Shawn Michaels would then team up with John Cena, who was the WWE champion, and take the World Tag Team titles.
Yes.
This would ultimately lead to the separation of later RKO, because after losing the tag titles, they focused their attention back on the WWE Championship. Were entered into the Money in the Bank ladder match at that year's WrestleMania.
Yep.
But then we go to fast forward a bit in 2007 to the summer when Randy Orton would feud with John Cena over the WWE Championship, involving John Cena Sr.
When I punted his dad in the skull, and at one point that year, I even hit an RKO on John Cena, legitimately injuring him.
Well, Cena was officially legitimately injured in the match with Kennedy, I believe it was.
Yes.
As a result of this I should say, at No Mercy in 2007, Randy Orton was awarded his first of what would be 10 WWE Championships. However, he would lose the title within minutes with Triple H, returned from injury, only to win it back later that night.
Yeah, pretty much hot potato, pretty much.
So the age of Orton would last until Backlash of 2008, in which Triple H would win a fatal 4-way elimination match. And then he would have rematches at Judgment Day and One Night Stand. However, there would be a broken collarbone suffered in the match at One Night Stand.
When Triple H countered my RKO, I landed bad on my collarbone, breaking it. Also during this time, Randy Orton would get rid of his Burn in My Life theme tune and replace it to the theme song that we know today.
Of Voices. Then Orton would reappear in September of 2008, but not medically cleared yet.
I was unfortunately injured in a motorbike accident.
and would ultimately start to build a legacy with Cody Rhodes and Ted DiBiase.
in which was a very dominant group.
They would cost CM Punk the World Heavyweight Championship on
Right.
the night of Unforgiven.
By planting Punk in the skull.
And they would continue to run rampant on certain people in 2008. Then, at the beginning of 2009, Orton decided it would be a very good idea to target for McMahon's.
Yes, I don't know what I was thinking. I attacked Vince, punched him in the head. I punted Shane in the head, and I RKO'd Stephanie.
And during this period, Randy Orton would also win the 2009 Royal Rumble match, which kind of put WWE in a bad situation because you can't fire or suspend the guy because he has a title match at WrestleMania.
Yes, where have you seen that kind of thing before?
Funnily enough, the champion at this time period, well, going into WrestleMania at least, was once again Triple H.
Wow.
And there was a segment on, it was a Go Home episode of Raw, I believe.
Yeah.
We had all three members of Legacy in the line, bunch of security, one of which would attempt to bask in his glory in later years.
So you did that.
And then Vince McMahon would come back on stage, followed by Shane McMahon, followed by Triple H.
And then one big brawl happened.
Now, the downside of this match is that it had to follow arguably, well, I say arguably, not much of an argument, the greatest match in WrestleMania history.
Yes.
At Backlash of 2009, in a weird situation, six-man tag, which they have done a couple of times, Randy Orton would win WWE Championship number 3. Would then lose it to Batista. But then Legacy would injure Batista.
Legitimately as well.
So then Orton would get the title back. For the better part of 2009, John Cena and Orton would hot potato the title a couple of times.
Yes.
But then, following the I Quit match, which I should say Iron Man match at Dragon Knights, Orton would begin a feud with the Power of Positivity.
or the Jamaican sensation, as it was known back then, in Kofi Kingston.
Which would lead to a spot which is still talked about today, in which Orton would utter the word stupid.
Stupid.
Then, when we go into 2010, kind of spelt the end of Legacy. At least.
Yeah.
Or at least Orton was removed from Legacy when they decided to turn him face. And there was a triple threat match at WrestleMania 26.
Yep.
Following this split, Orton would spend most of 2010 either feuding for or with a world title, unsuccessfully challenging Jack Swagger for the World Heavyweight Championship, whilst participating in a fatal four-way match for the WWE Championship at the Fatal 4-Way pay-per-view, in which a little group called the Nexus would get involved.
Yeah.
At last Night of Champions of 2010, Orton would win the WWE Championship from Sheamus in a six-pack challenge and defend and successfully retain a Hell in a Cell. Then he would enter a brief feud with the head of Nexus, Wade Barrett.
In what was a very interesting little feud there.
Before a little cockroach called The Miz would cash in the Money in the Bank contract.
Cockroach couldn't have said it any better myself.
Then going into WrestleMania 27 in 2011, Orton would find himself feuding with the new leader of the Nexus, CM Punk.
Yeah.
But then, after this business with Punk was done, we would go into a interesting storyline with Randy Orton, Christian, and the World Heavyweight Championship.
And this one more match stuff.
Christian wins the World Heavyweight Championship after Edge vacates it due to
What we thought
was a career-threatening injury, was a career-ending injury. Not quite.
Yeah, not quite.
A few days later, on an episode of SmackDown, Orton wins the title from him. Successfully retained at Over the Limit and Capital Punishment.
Yeah. What a weird name for venue that was.
But then, at Money in the Bank, due to Orton's temper and stuff, a stipulation was added that if Orton got disqualified, Christian would win the title.
And unfortunately, because of Christian's antics, I kicked Christian in the gonads and lost the belt.
Yes, but he would win it back at SummerSlam, despite Christian trying to get out of that match by threatening to sue the WWE and supposedly recruiting Edge.
Yeah.
Then Orton would go into a feud with the World's Strongest Man.
Well, great.
In which Mark Henry would win the championship.
For the first time in his career.
Then after this, Orton would say hello again to Cody Rhodes.
Yes.
But going into 2012, Orton was mostly silent from the championship picture. However, at WrestleMania he had a match with Kane.
They totally set the world alight, did it?
Not really. And would compete in the Money in the Bank ladder match.
In which I would win.
He would, of course, come up against just a little group known as the Shield.
You can't have to throw that now. But then we get into 2013.
Yes, then in 2013, things got a little bit hectic because Orton would win the Money in the Bank ladder match. But also Daniel Bryan would win the WWE Championship at SummerSlam, only to be pedigreed
Yeah.
and cast in on
Cover 1, 2, 3.
champion. There would be a bit of controversy surrounding the rematch of a fast count.
With a certain referee that my colleague does not like.
Then we would go to jump ahead to when they unified the WWE and World Heavyweight Championships.
How is that something?
With yet another match between Randy Orton and John Cena. Now, why does that also sound familiar? A match you've seen 100 times. This would mostly last until WrestleMania 30 with a Miracle on Bourbon Street, in which Daniel Bryan would win the title.
Yeah.
Then we go to a brief Evolution reunion
Against the Shield.
Then after the situation, when Seth Rollins decided to turn heel,
Yes.
Orton would, in the later part, be written off TV so he could go and film The Condemned.
Yes. And also during this time period when he did come back, he did feud with Seth Rollins and hit what my colleague calls the greatest RKO in the history of WrestleMania.
Yes. Then in 2016, first of all, in the summer of 2016, we had the Viper versus the Beast.
Yes, because there was a judgment being between me and
Brock Lesnar.
Oh, Jesus.
And this is one of few times since the PGL that I can remember blood being spilt out.
Yes, my own blood.
After this match, Orton would enter a program with Bray Wyatt.
Yes.
There was a bit of psychological warfare. This would, quote unquote, lead to Orton joining the Wyatt family, winning the SmackDown Tag Team Championships as part of the Wyatt family.
Yep.
But ultimately turning on Bray Wyatt. And then after Wyatt won the WWE Championship at the Elimination Chamber, would face Wyatt at WrestleMania for the championship, only to lose it to Jinder Mahal.
Let's not remember about those times. Thank you very much.
Then, after a few rematches with Mahal, Orton would feud with a little person called Rusev.
Oh yes, I remember him.
10-second match at WrestleMania 2017.
Yeah, pretty much. Nothing really there to write home about.
And nothing really significant to talk about here until Orton would go after the one title that had eluded him,
Which was,
the United States Championship.
and which was currently being held at the time by one glorious Robert Roode.
And then, of course, just like the WWE Championship, he would lose that to Jinder Mahal.
Then we head to
In 2019, I would say Orton seemed to almost just move into a position where he was helping pull over some of the younger guys,
basically, yeah.
and would have a good match at WrestleMania 35 with AJ Styles.
Yes.
Then we'll jump forward slightly to the 2020 Royal Rumble.
Where I have a little bit of reuniting with You Think You Know Me.
Where Edge returned after 9 years to a in-ring competition. Then he would also be RKO'd by Randy Orton.
Telling me here in the process. And me hitting a chair to one as well.
In the
Leading to a Coronavania.
in the Performance Center of WrestleMania, they would have a last man standing match. Then they would do the greatest wrestling match ever
Oh god.
at Backlash.
Which I ended up winning after Edge legitimately suffered an injury.
That would be put on hold until the 2021 Royal Rumble match, in which they literally started 1 and 2. And then what happened? And also during this time, Randy Orton decided to commit murder inside the Thunderdome.
Yes, by burning alive the Fiend in a Firefly Funhouse match.
Ultimately led to yet another match of WrestleMania, which ultimately led to the Fiend's
Release.
And then, in one of the most unlikely moves, and that has still been going on for the better part of 2021, and for the better part of going on a year now, Orton has teamed with Riddle.
Yes, you heard us right. Riddle.
And is now a 2-time Raw Tag Team Champion with him, and it appears, and I believe the man has said himself, to be having the most fun he has ever had.
In his long career with WWE.
So that in a nutshell sums up 20 years of the career of Randall Keith Orton,
I'd
aka.
like to say congratulations, Randy Orton, on reaching the milestone, and here's to another 20 years.
I highly doubt he'll be around for another 20, another 10, possibly, depending on how things go. Next week, we will return to our normal programming with WrestleMania out of the way. There will be a backlash.
Join us then. Until then, he's been
We still have friends, and he's been.
Randy.